What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to TacticalBassin. Today's video, we are simplifying summer crankbait fishing. We're talking magnum cranks, deep cranks, shallow square bills. We're covering all of it. Let's go. Summertime crankbait fishing. Where do I even start? There's so much to cover. Gonna try and simplify it for you guys. Summertime into fall, offshore, deep cranking. You're chasing fish, schooling fish that are going after bait. Some of the best days cranking you'll have the entire year right now. As those fish are feeding up on those bait balls, you're out off a ledge or a creek channel, fishing that break. Those fish are just staging right there and just feeding, gorging themselves. A crankbait is one of the best ways to continually have success and put fish in the boat. But where do you start? You know, there's so many different crankbaits on the market, so many different depths. I'm gonna try and simplify it for you guys today because I love crankbait fishing. You could say that I'm a crankbait fanatic. You know, Matt and I have several double digits on crankbaits, square bills, deep cranks, magnum cranks, 10XDs, that sort of stuff. It was a few years ago we really transitioned kind of from the swim baits to the crankbaits. You know, every angler kind of has different ways they like to catch them, and you kind of go through these, at least I do, I can speak for myself, different ways you want to catch them, right? And you get tired of catching them a certain way, and then you want to try and catch them a different way, whether it's a big worm or a big crankbait or a swim bait or glide bait, big topwater. But a few years ago, we really started putting a lot of time in the magnum cranks and had a lot of success doing it. And our shoulders, you know, are definitely stronger and more sore because of it. But I mean, this came out, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. Time's flying these days. I can't even tell you when, but the 10XD kind of revolutionized summertime deep cranking. You know, fishing 20 to 25 feet with a crankbait. Like I said earlier, Matt and I kind of transitioned to fishing those deep cranks because it's a big profile bait, but you're getting down to depths, and you're fishing for fish that haven't seen the action and the sound of a big crankbait like that. You know, what's so special about a crankbait, whether it be a shallow running crankbait, square bill, a deep or medium running crankbait, or one of these magnum crankbaits, is the ability to override a fish and its thought process, but to really key into the hard wire of that bass. It is made to eat, right? When you can bring a crankbait by and you deflect off of something and you get a little bit of a directional change or a little pause and go action, something that just really triggers those fish, they have to eat. Just like a cat, if you drag something by a cat real quick, it'll just jump out and react, even though it probably wants to be a lazy cat and just laying down. So bass are kind of the same way. So being able to fish these crankbaits at depths and speeds that we weren't able to just a few years ago has definitely changed the game. So magnum deep cranks, I'm gonna call them. You know, you got the Azuma, the Zboss, the 10XD, 6 cents makes a great one. The Big M by Megabass. These are all magnum cranks. You're talking 20 to 25 feet down there dredging bottom, and being able to take a bait this big, I mean, that's a 7-inch bait, and deflect and change directions and pause and float up, something you can't typically do with a traditional swim bait, has really allowed anglers to catch a lot more and a lot bigger fish. So we're gonna cover those. We're gonna cover your traditional deep cranks, anything from 15 to 20 foot, and then some shallow cranks. Got some different ones on the market and some that we have a ton of confidence in and what to look for. So let's start deep and then we'll go shallow. We'll transition shallow. Typically this time of the year, you guys know, if you follow along the channel, you know that we've done videos, where do bass go in the summer? Summer transition, you know, the movements of bass. for the most part, a majority of the fish, after they're done with the spawn and they come out of their spawning bays, they're gonna move to the first deep water access, and they're gonna hang out on that break or that ledge, creek channel, break, whatever it may be. And then the other fish are gonna stay shallow. They're gonna be your grass fish, your shallow water fish. We're gonna talk about those fish here in a little bit. But the deep fish, rock piles, creek channels, ledges. You hear about ledge fishing on the TVA, right? You know, that is the main river. We're sitting out here in the main river, Tennessee River, Lake Chickamauga. You got ledges for miles, 60 miles and farther. And these fish come out and they just stack right on the edge, right on that transition. You can catch them on hair jigs and big worms and swim baits and flutter spoons. But a deep diving crankbait is something that you can just cover water and just really dredge those fish and get it in front of those fish and trigger them. Like I was talking about just a little bit ago, really override their natural instincts, if you will, and just really get them to bite. And then once you get one bite, if those fish are schooled up, I mean, you can catch them on a crankbait every cast, sometimes 2 at a time. Had that happen several times where you're catching 2, 3, 4, 5 pounders on each hook of the bait, you know? Bass are crazy. They are feeding machines. And I mean, growing up, the KVDs, the Keith Combs, the guys that are really good with crankbaits and they can get a school fired up, man, you can do damage in a hurry. So enough about why you should be throwing a crankbait. If you haven't thrown a crankbait, a style of or a version of a crankbait, you definitely should, especially after this video. But let's start deep and then we'll go shallow. So I've narrowed it down to about 3 baits. I'm trying to simplify it for you guys. 3 baits, 3 main colors. I'll link all the gear and stuff down below in the video description. But my #1 go-to, again, I'm calling these magnum cranks. 20 to 25 foot is gonna be the 10XD. The Strike King 10XD, you know, they have the whole line, the 8XD, the 6XD, the 5XD. You know, there's a whole line, but the 10XD is special. You know, it allows us to get this bait, there we go, get this bait out there and just dredge bottom. You know, this bait is down there, like I said, 20, 25 feet, and it's deflecting. It's coming up over that rock pile. It's coming through that little chunk rock or that little current seam. You're down there. Wasn't a very smart decision throwing downstream of a river. But you're down there just dredging bottom, deflecting, and hoping to come across a bass. But again, this time of the year, you're using your electronics. You're covering a lot of water to find the schools. And then once you find them, turn around, spot lock, and just grind it in their face. But that 10XD gets down deep, it stays down deep, and has produced so many big fish for us, you know, through the years. But that 10XD, again, you're gonna feel it in your shoulder, you're gonna feel it in your abs all day, but this thing gets down. I'm not sure if we're gonna get run over or not. I don't know if you guys can see this Boat US towboat towing this big yacht. Go ahead and get out of the way real quick. That dude had a bad day. It'd be an even worse day if he hit us, but that 10XD, guys, you cannot go wrong with it. You do need special gear. You need a rod. You need a rod and a reel setup that will allow you to comfortably crank this thing all day. My favorite rod, this is the 969. 968 is a good rod too. It is a deep crank rod. This rod loads fairly deep into the butt of the rod. So when you get those fish pegged, that rod just does all the work. When these Magnum cranks came on the market, a lot of guys were throwing underpowered rods, and that's really important. You got to emphasize that. If you're throwing a rod that is completely maxed out on the handle turn, as you're cranking this thing down there, and then all of a sudden you get bit and you try to load up, you got nowhere to go. You got no more load in that rod, and you're not going to get a good hook set. So it's really important to match the gear. It's going to save your shoulder, save your elbow, and it's going to save your fish catches and help you catch more fish and get them in the boat. So as far as reels, you guys know that Matt and I love throwing braid to leader, but typically most time we're throwing straight fluoro. This is a Tranks 200. I want that line capacity. Crankbait fishing, it's all about length of cast to get that steeper dive angle. That farther cast you get out there, the lower that angle is and the easier for that bait to get down, and it stays down in that strike zone longer before it transitions and starts coming up to you on the boat. So really important to get a nice long cast. That 6XD is my number one. The Azuma Zboss, either the 22 or the 25, is another great one. Again, that one's paired up on that Tranks 200, and this is actually the 968, like I said earlier, with that 10XD. And then the other one is this guy right here. That is the Megabass Big M. Little bit of size comparison. Here is a Rapala this is a DT 20. You see the size difference in that thing? This is a 20-foot diving crank, and this is just a giant down there, but it gets down, stays down deep, little tighter action. Crankbait fishing, it's all about switching it up. You can see that I have 3-4 different cranks tied on. The reason being, say you're on that school, you want to continually rotate through baits. Either size, if you're still getting the same depth, sound, color, or action. They all matter. And if you keep giving those fish the same thing over and over, eventually you're going to turn off. So you want to kind of rotate through the baits. Throw the 10XD, throw the Azuma, and then throw the Megabass and switch. If you're just throwing 6 or 10XDs, throw a different color. It's probably my favorite color that they make. Again, I'll link everything down below in the video description, but switch through colors. While I'm talking about colors, I keep it very simple in all my cranks. 3 basic colors. Some kind of bait fish or shad pattern. Some kind of, I only have them here in my shallows, some kind of craw pattern. And then some kind of chartreuse, either chartreuse blue, chartreuse black back, something like that, a little bolder color to really get those fish fired up. But that's it. I rotate through those 3 types of colors. Like I said, some kind of shad color, some kind of chartreuse, maybe it's some kind of shad with blue back, chartreuse belly, and then a craw pattern. So keep it really, really simple as far as colors. There's so many good colorways out there. You could get poor in a hurry having to buy every single color, everything that looks good. But if you're trying to simplify it, or you're just trying to get into this technique, limit it to those 3 styles of colors, and you guys will have success. Now, moving on, getting into the more traditional deep diving cranks. You know, this is your Norman, your DD22s, your Rapalas, either DT20, DT16s. What else? Strike King 6XD. How do you leave home without that in the summertime? And then, of course, the tactical crank, the crank that Matt and I designed. I Again, it's all preference, but it's really important to play around with different colors, different actions. You know, now with forward-facing sonar, you can really see real time how deep is your crankbait getting. You know, you can throw out 70, 80, 90 feet, get that bait down and say, oh wow, that DT20 is a DT20. It's not a DT18 or a DT21, it's 20 foot. More importantly, if you have forward-facing sonar, you pause. How fast or high float is that bait? You know, how much work is it to get back down? Really cool, you get down there, you see that bait coming and here comes the big blob, you pause it and smokes it. Really cool to be able to play around with the forward-facing sonar and deep cranking. But real time now, you can see how deep these cranks are truly getting. So deep cranks, I like to call, we're gonna call between 15 and 20 foot. My number one go-to, that guy right there, Strike King 6XD. Dude, I've had like, I mean, just this bait alone, look at the bill. That's probably like a 5.5 XD now. I mean, that thing is almost worn square, but just a money of a color. Put those owner crank hooks on there. That's the 906 CBR crankbait rods, that Loomis. That thing is money. And then I have that paired up with a Metanium. That's an 8-to-1 gear ratio reel. I'm covering a lot of water, I'm moving quick. Again, it's all about triggering. It's all about deflecting and triggering these fish to eat. And once you get one fired up, especially if they're schooled up, man, it's go time. It's really important to get that fish in, unhooked, and get another cast out there. But it's, again, it's burn, 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 burn. Once you get down, you can either just dredge, boop, 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 but I'm still, I mean, that's 8-to-1, or it's burn, 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 pause, let that bait stop. You can kind of point at it, give that a little bit of play so that bait really stops, and 9 times out of 10, that's when you get bit. Or if you're just dredging, you deflect, you pause it, you're gonna get hammered right after you come off of whatever you deflected off of and got that directional change. Again, you'd think that I'd learn not to throw that downstream in a river, but the Rapala, the DT series, I love the 16s and the 20s. These guys are true to what they say. Again, you throw a DT20 out there, it is 20 foot. Some cranks, it's really, I mean, it could be a 18 to 20 foot crank, but really you're only getting, you know, 14 or 16 feet out of it. So it's really important if that tree top or that rock pile that you're trying to deflect off of is down in 18 foot and you're not hitting it. But again, pair that up with that Tranks, straight fluoro, typically 12 to 15. If I'm throwing the Magnum cranks, I'm throwing 15-pound fluoro, but more often than not, I'm throwing 12-pound on all the other cranks. That is the big cranker. They make a Magnum crankers. That's the St. Croix rod. That's an awesome, awesome rod. So the 6XD, that Rapala, that DT series, tried and true Norman DD22. This is probably, these things are so inexpensive in the price, in the category. This is probably the first crankbait that I really went crazy on and bought, you know, 8 or 10 different colors on, and out there on Clear Lake, man, I messed them up on that DD22, DD14, DD22, and then of course the tactical crank. You know, these are more of your ghosty colors, more flashy, more natural colors, tighter wobble action, but again, it's getting down there 15, 18 foot, and you can burn this thing. You can absolutely make that crank fly. But those are the deep cranks. Again, keep it simple. Go with a shad pattern, a craw pattern, and some kind of chartreuse. Like I said, chartreuse blue, chartreuse black back, something like that. Something a little bit more bold if you have stained water, and you guys will have success rotating through those different baits. So now let's change gears entirely and talk about the shallow fish. You know, again, crankbait, summer crankbait fishing is such a broad category. even though I've talked about, you know, 6 or 7 baits already, I've really narrowed it down from the several hundred that are on the market. But yeah, let's talk about shallow cranks. So earlier in this video, I talked about, you know, where fish go. A lot of the fish go out to the deeper water, you know, 12, 15, 18, 20, 25, 30 foot. They go out there and that's where they summer. They're chasing bait balls around. That is their summer haunt. The other fish do the complete opposite, and it's all about grass. Grass, shallow grass, or shallow rock piles or wood. You know, if you're on some kind of a river system that you have riprap, maybe a delta that has a levee system, you can straight up do some damage taking a craw colored square bill and just burning that thing along the rock, that riprap in 2 to 4 to 5 feet. And just every time you tick something, just pause it, and man, those bass will just knock the lights out of these things. But it's all about grass, all about rock. It's all about hard cover structure, dock pilings, rock, wood, and then grass. A lot of these fish are going to be up in the grass. It's really hard to fish a square bill through grass. I love doing it. It takes some special gear also, you know, braid to leader, something that's a little bit more grass resilient proof, if you will. But you can get really aggressive with a square bill. I mean, you hit that grass, you pop it through, right? You're burning this thing. You just wanted to get down just deep enough to be ticking the grass. And if you get hung up in the grass, pop that rod, break it free. But a square bill, playing around with different depths, can be magical over grass beds. Again, water temp is up. It's right now, probably through till the next month or so, the water temps on your fishery are probably the hottest they're going to be all year. So fish like to bury themselves up in that grass, cooler water, but the fish are active, right? So be active with that square bill. I narrow, or I simplify my square bills to 2 categories: silent and knocker. That's that River to Sea Biggie. You guys know how much we love that. Strike, or that's that Lucky Craft 1.5. Silent and knocker, or rattle. Typically, for me, I've caught bigger fish with the silent square bills. As you're, I guess you can sneak up on them, really catch those fish off guard. Kind of like what I talked about earlier with running something by a cat real quick. If they're not hearing that bait coming from, you know, 30 or 40 feet away, and all of a sudden that thing just blows by them and you pause it, I mean, they're just wired to eat. They are feeding machines. They're so cool. My kids have a little bass in an aquarium, and we feed him minnows and stuff, little mosquito fish. And you can't believe how aggressive those fish are. I mean, even just little fingerlings, how aggressive they are, and the amount of food they truly can eat. I mean, that guy, he might be 3 inches, and he ate 3 mosquito fish that big last night. I mean, a 5-pound bass can eat and eat. They are just eating and feeding machines. That one scared me. But when you can get really aggressive with that square bill and ripping it through that grass, that is when you're going to get bit. So let's talk about my favorite square bills real quick, and then we'll wrap this video up. Biggie, that thing is money. Again, go with a shad pattern. That's abalone shad. Those are some beefy hooks on there. Something that mimics a bait fish or a sunfish, a bluegill, something like that, and then some kind of craw pattern. The other one, this one's a little bit different. This one's kind of an in-between because it is a silent bait. This is the Jabberjaw, but it's got a loose bill. It almost acts like a bladed jig. So it adds vibration, adds thump, adds sound. Again, burn, 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 pause. Burn, 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 hit the grass, pop it, free. This is kind of like an in-between. It's a great bait that goes 3 to 5 feet or so, depending on the line. Typically, this type of setup, I'm going braid to leader, either 12 or 15 pound mono. But again, fast reel, going with a crank rod. That way, when you do hook those fish, they stay pinned. They come and jump out of the water. That rod doesn't unload too quickly. It just stays bowed and does all the work for you. But that Jabberjaw, it's a really unique bait with that lip on it going side to side. Just lets that bait run true and really add an extra bit of wobble to it. You know, I talked about crankbait wobbles just a little bit ago, but summertime, warm water, you typically want a real wide, real aggressive kicking crankbait. And then you can change it up from there and go with something a little bit tighter, but start off with a real aggressive wide bait. So the biggie, that Jabberjaw, and if you want to go silent, that Lucky Craft 1.5. Again, some kind of craw pattern, some kind of shad or baby bluegill pattern, and you guys will be set. The only other crank I want to talk about, and then we'll wrap this video up, is the super shallow square bills. Now, I talked about this last year when I did this video. Not much has changed, but there is some kind of void in the market for square bills that run less than 2 foot. This guy's the exception. That is the Spro Fat John 50. It's a matte shad color. But what this bait allows me to do, if you're on a fishery where the grass hasn't hit the surface yet, but it's down, you know, a foot or so below the surface, it allows me to burn this square bill over the tops of that grass, just ticking it enough. If you tick it, pause, like I said, pop it through, but it's a shallow running square bill, and it's actually not really even a square bill if you look at it. I don't know what you'd call this, but you see the bill shape on there? But it allows me to fish this thing over grass beds, super shallow, really quickly, really aggressively, and that bait straight out catches them. It is a silent bait, but you can cover a lot of water and really put the hurt into them, coming over the tops of them in that ultra shallow water. Guys, hopefully that simplified things for you. You know, pick a category, a depth that your fishery or that you want to fish in, and adjust your baits accordingly. You can do all of these things except for the magnum cranks on traditional gear. As far as rods, you want something that's got a little bit less power, a little bit more of a moderate action, not so tippy. Again, you want that rod just to load up and do all the play, all the work for you. But if not, if you're a guy that has just a few rods or you know, on a budget, we'll link some budget cranking rods down below in the video description. But a medium action rod, medium power, moderate fast action will work. But there it is, guys. Hopefully that simplified it for you. There's so many crankbaits on the market, so many good cranks on the market. It's all about depth, all about sound, all about action. There's a lot of all abouts, but hopefully in this video I covered them, simplified it for you. If you guys have any questions, please leave those down below in the comment section. This one felt like a long one. What do we have? We have almost 30 minutes. Whew. Crankbait fishing, summertime. This is going to be good all the way through into fall. And if you guys get good at it, don't be afraid to go out at night. Some of my best days summertime cranking were actually summer night cranking. Those fish are just, they're feed machines, like I said, and low light, those fish move up or move to the certain key areas, and you could just one after another. So much fun. But like I said, if you guys like this video, give us a like, hit that subscribe button. We passed 500,000 subscribers. Thank you guys so much. You guys are amazing. But yeah, summertime cranking. Hopefully this gave you some confidence. Hopefully it simplified the baits, the colors. Like I said, I will link the hooks, line gear, all that stuff down below in the video description. But get out on the water. Don't be afraid of the sun. Don't be afraid of the heat, the summertime boat traffic, because those fish are still eating and they need you to catch them. Guys, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you on the next video.